What you're about to see might surprise you. Welcome to a channel where content is made to keep you interested from start to finish. Subscribe now and don't miss what's next. The morning I found out my daughter-in-law had removed me from the family group chat, I was sitting at my kitchen table in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, eating oatmeal I had made for one. Not because I wanted oatmeal, because the groceries I had ordered the week before, the ones I paid for and had delivered to their house 40 minutes away, included everything except the things I actually needed for myself. It had been that way for a while. I just had not been paying attention. I noticed the chat was gone because my granddaughter Sophie had sent a video of her school play rehearsal. I knew she had, because she called me afterward and said, "Grandma, did you see my curtsy? I practiced it for you." I had not seen it. I went looking for the thread and it was not there. Not buried, not muted, gone. My name removed as cleanly as a splinter pulled from skin. I called my son Daniel right away. He picked up after 4 rings, the way he always did when he saw my name, like he needed a moment to prepare himself. "Hey, Mom." "Daniel, I cannot find the family chat." A pause. Not a confused pause. A rehearsed one. "Oh, yeah." Courtney reorganized it. She made a new one. "It is just immediate family for now. You know how she gets about her phone. I know how she gets." In 22 years of marriage to my son, Courtney had perfected the art of making exclusion sound like housekeeping. "Sophie called me about her rehearsal video," I said carefully. "She wanted me to see it. I will forward it to you." He never did. I set the phone down and looked at my oatmeal. It had gone cold. I thought about how many school plays I had attended in those 22 years, how many birthday cakes I had baked, how many times I had driven 40 minutes in the rain because Courtney had a migraine and the boys needed pickup from practice. I thought about the number sitting quietly in the back of my mind, the one I had been adding to for years without ever writing it down. That night, for the first time, I wrote it down. I had kept records, not out of suspicion, out of habit. I was a bookkeeper for 31 years before I retired. Numbers were how I understood the world. I pulled out the accordion folder I kept in the hall closet behind the extra blankets, the one labeled simply household, and I carried it to the kitchen table. I worked for 3 hours. The mortgage assistance I had started when Daniel's firm had a slow quarter and never stopped. The car note for Courtney's Tahoe. The boys' travel baseball fees, their equipment, their cleats every season because feet keep growing. The grocery deliveries, mine included in theirs, until they stopped including mine. The pest control contract, the streaming subscriptions I did not watch, the summer camp deposits, the birthday party venue I had booked and paid for 2 years in a row, the airline tickets for a family vacation to Florida that I was not invited on because, as Courtney had explained, they needed it to be just the 4 of them and their energy. When I finished counting, I sat back in my chair and pressed my hands flat on the table. 94 transfers. 94 separate ways I had kept their life running while mine quietly rusted at the edges. I looked around my kitchen. The linoleum near the sink had been peeling since 2019. The ceiling fan in the living room made a clicking sound on every 3rd rotation. My reading glasses were held together at one hinge with a piece of electrical tape because I had not gotten around to replacing them. I had not gotten around to a lot of things. There was always something more pressing. There was always Daniel's family. I looked at the total monthly figure, and my breath left me slowly, like air from a tire with a small leak. It was more than my entire pension check. My 31 years of bookkeeping, my careful saving, my Social Security, all of it going out before I could see it settle. I sat there in the quiet of my kitchen in Murfreesboro for a long time. The clicking fan kept its rhythm. The linoleum kept its curl. And something inside me that had been bending for years finally went straight. I did not sleep much that night. I lay in the dark and listened to the house and thought about the version of myself that had agreed to all of this. She was not a foolish woman. She loved her son. She had raised him alone after his father passed when Daniel was 14, and she had promised herself that he would never feel the absence as a wound. She had made sure of that. Perhaps too sure. Perhaps she had been so focused on making sure he never lacked that she had never taught him to notice when someone else did. By 5 in the morning I was dressed. I put on the navy blazer I wore to my last bookkeeping job, the one that made me feel precise and clear-headed. I made coffee. I did not eat. My stomach was not asking for anything. At 9 o'clock I drove to First Horizon Bank on Medical Center Parkway, where I had kept my accounts for over 25 years. My banker, a steady woman named Carol Hutchins, who had processed my retirement paperwork and never once made me feel old for asking questions, waved me in from the lobby before I reached the desk. "Margaret," she said, "you look like you have made a decision. 94 of them," I told her. I placed the accordion folder on her desk. She opened it without theatrics, the way a professional handles something serious. Her eyes moved down the pages slowly. "I need every automatic transfer to Daniel and Courtney's accounts stopped. All of them. Today." She looked up. "All 94? Every single one." She turned to her computer. Her fingers moved steadily. Then she paused, and her expression shifted in a way that made my chest tighten. "Margaret, I need to show you something before we go further." She turned the monitor toward me. There was a flagged access request on my investment account. Someone had attempted to add a joint account holder using a power of attorney form. The signature on the form did not match mine. The name on the application was Courtney Reeves. The room did not spin. My vision did not blur. I had been a bookkeeper for 31 years. I had seen embezzlement. I had seen quiet theft dressed in paperwork. What I felt was not surprise. It was the terrible clarity of a thing you have suspected without letting yourself know. "When was this submitted?" I asked, and was proud of how level my voice stayed. 11 days ago. It was flagged automatically because the notarization stamp did not match our approved registry. We froze the attempt and sent a standard inquiry letter to your address. Did you receive it? I thought about my mail. I thought about how Daniel had offered 6 months ago to forward my mail through their address, since I traveled sometimes to my sister's in Knoxville. I had thought it was thoughtful at the time. "No," I said. "I did not receive it." Carol held my gaze with quiet steadiness. "I think you need to take some additional steps." We spent the next 2 hours closing every door. New account numbers, new passwords, fraud alerts, updated beneficiaries. Courtney's name removed from the emergency contact field I had added years ago, out of practical kindness. I revoked every standing authorization that had Daniel's name on it. I changed the contact address back to my own. When I signed the last form, my hand was as steady as it had been on my first day of work in 1987. Carol walked me out. At the door, she put a hand briefly on my arm. "You are doing the right thing," she said. I drove home with the windows down even though it was only 58 degrees. The cold felt honest. The first message came at 2:14 that afternoon. I know the time because I was in the backyard pulling the last of the dead marigolds from the border bed when my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. It was Courtney. "Margaret, the mortgage autopay didn't go through. Can you check your account?" Not hello, not how are you. A directive, same as always, delivered with the casual certainty of a woman who had never once considered the possibility that the thing she was checking on might be gone by design rather than accident. I tucked the phone back in my pocket and pulled another marigold. The next message arrived 8 minutes later. Also, the boys' baseball registration bounced. The fall season starts in 2 weeks. This needs to be fixed today. Then Daniel. "Mom, something is wrong with the transfers. Call me." Then Courtney again. "Are you having trouble with online banking? I can help you reset it if you forgot the password." I almost laughed. The audacity of that sentence had a particular texture I recognized. It was the texture of someone who believed completely that your incompetence was more likely than their exposure. I went inside, washed the soil from my hands, and put the kettle on. By 4 o'clock, the messages had changed tone. Daniel's had moved from concern to confusion to something with an edge to it. Mom, this is serious. We have bills due. The Tahoe payment is going to be late. Do you understand what that does to our credit? Mom, please respond. I poured my tea and sat in the armchair by the front window. The maple in the yard had started to turn. The first real color of fall, orange at the edges like something cautious about committing. At 5:47, Courtney sent a message that I read twice. Margaret, I am not sure what you think you are doing, but you need to understand that this family depends on consistency. If you are trying to make a point, you are only hurting the boys. Think about that before you continue whatever this is. The boys. She had brought the boys in at 5:47 on the first day. I set the phone face down on the side table and opened the novel I had been trying to finish for 6 weeks. I read 4 pages and actually absorbed them, which was more than I had managed in a month. That night, I slept without waking once. Daniel came to my house the next morning without calling first. I heard his truck in the driveway at 8:20, and I finished my coffee before I went to the door. I did not want to face this conversation with an empty stomach, and I did not want him to see me hurry. He was standing on the porch in a fleece pullover and jeans, looking less like a man who billed $400 an hour and more like the 14-year-old boy who used to stand in my kitchen after school, not knowing how to say he missed his father. I opened the door. Come in. He came in. I gestured toward the kitchen table and he sat down, both hands wrapped around nothing, his jaw working quietly. Mom, he started. The mortgage is going to be late. I know. We have a payment due on, Daniel. I kept my voice even. I know what you have due. I have been paying it for 4 years. He stopped. I sat down across from him and folded my hands on the table the way I used to when we went over his homework. 94 transfers, I said. That is how many automatic payments I have been running for your household. Your mortgage, Courtney's car, the boys' activities, the groceries, the subscriptions, the services. 94. His face moved through several things. Discomfort. The beginning of an argument that dissolved before it formed. Then something I had not seen from him in a long time. Shame. Mom, I didn't realize it was... That is exactly the problem. I kept my voice level. You never asked. Not once in 4 years did you sit down with me and say, Mom, are you all right carrying this? Because I can tell you what you would have heard. I am not all right. I have been patching my reading glasses with electrical tape. My kitchen floor has been peeling since before the pandemic. I postponed my own dental work twice because there was a baseball tournament fee due. He was quiet. He was looking at his hands. You make a good living, Daniel. You and Courtney both do. You take vacations, you host dinners, you join the country club. And somewhere in there you forgot that those things were only possible because someone quiet was covering the ground underneath you. He finally looked up. His eyes were red at the rims. Why didn't you say something? It was the question I had been waiting for, and it still arrived like a small, blunt blow because the answer was so simple and so sad. Because you never asked, and because I loved you too much to make you uncomfortable. He did not speak for a while. The house held the silence without awkwardness. It was my house. It had held harder things. Then his voice dropped. Courtney thinks she can talk to someone, a mediator. She's saying you're not handling your finances responsibly. I let that sentence sit in the air between us. I watched him hear it through my ears. Courtney, I said slowly, attempted to add herself as a joint holder on my investment account 11 days ago, using a power of attorney form with a forged signature. The bank flagged it and notified me. The color left his face in a single, visible wave. What? She has been intercepting my mail, Daniel. The bank's inquiry letter went to your address. I have already spoken with a fraud attorney. I have copies of the flagged application, the signature comparison, and the mail forwarding record I authorized in your name. He pushed back from the table and stood up, not in anger, in the way people stand when the room feels suddenly too small for what they have just been told. Mom. His voice was barely above a whisper. I did not know about that. I believe you, I said. And I did. That was perhaps the most painful part. Daniel was not calculating. Daniel was simply absent. He had learned to let Courtney manage things, and Courtney had learned to manage everything. What are you going to do? He asked. That depends on what Courtney does next, I said. If she walks away from this quietly, I will let the fraud matter rest. If she pushes, I will not. He stood at the edge of my kitchen for a long moment. Then he sat back down. Not at the table. On the small bench by the back door, the one where the boys used to sit to pull off their muddy cleats. He sat there like a man who had just arrived somewhere he should have been a long time ago. I'm sorry, Mom. I nodded. I did not rush to absolve him. Some things need to be sat with. He left an hour later, quieter than he had arrived. I stood at the window and watched his truck back out of the driveway. The maple had opened another degree of orange since morning. I noticed I was hungry, and I was glad of it. Hunger means your body is paying attention to itself again. That afternoon, Sophie called me. She was 20, a junior at Belmont, studying music education with the kind of clear-eyed certainty about her future that I found genuinely moving. She had her mother's cheekbones and her father's stubbornness, but her temperament was entirely her own, something warmer and more careful than either of them. "Grandma," she said, "are you okay? It's really bad over here." I told her I was fine. Better than I had been in a while, actually. She was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, I saw the bank folder, the one Dad threw on the counter. I saw all of it. A pause. I had no idea. "I know, sweetheart. 94? Her voice was disbelieving and grieved at once. 94. Another pause, longer this time. "Grandma, I want to tell you something, and I need you to not be upset with me for how I found it." She took a breath. "I went looking for my birth certificate last month in Mom's office files. She was going to help me update my passport. I found some documents in there that had your name on them, like a lot of your personal information. Loan pre-applications, a refinancing inquiry. There were notes in her handwriting about timeline. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. I had already known about the investment account, but this told me the scope had been larger. "I took photos," Sophie said. "I did not know what to do with them. I almost didn't tell you. But Grandma, you need to know. Email them to me," I said. "Right now, while we are on the phone." She did. I opened them while she waited. 4 documents. One was a preliminary refinancing application on my house, with my address, my estimated home value, and projected equity figures written in Courtney's neat, looping hand. There were notes about timing in the margin. 2 of the other documents were loan co-signer inquiry forms, the kind a bank uses when someone wants to attach another person's assets to a borrowing application. Courtney had not just been accessing my accounts. She had been building a case for using my house, my equity, my name, as collateral for something larger. Something I would have been responsible for and likely never told about until it was too late to undo. I sat with this for a moment. 31 years as a bookkeeper had taught me that financial harm dressed in family clothing is still financial harm. It does not matter that the person holding the pen shares your last name by marriage. The damage lands the same. "Sophie," I said, "I am not upset with you. You did exactly the right thing." She exhaled. "Mom keeps saying you're doing this out of spite, that you just want to see them struggle. And what do you think?" A brief silence. Then, "I think you finally stopped letting them not see you." I had to press my lips together for a moment before I could answer. "That is exactly right." She told me she had a new part-time position at a music studio teaching beginner piano to kids on Saturday mornings. She paid her own rent, split with 2 roommates in East Nashville. She was proud of it. She said it without bragging. Just the quiet satisfaction of someone learning the weight of their own life and finding it manageable. "I am proud of you," I told her. "More than you probably know." After we hung up, I sat in the armchair for a while, without doing anything. Outside, the maples stood in the late afternoon light, more orange now than green. I thought about the version of myself who had been standing at the edge of her own life for years, handing pieces of it quietly over a fence to people who never looked to see where they were coming from. I thought about how long a person can do that before she forgets what she was trying to hold on to. I was done forgetting. I called the fraud attorney the following morning and forwarded Sophie's photos. He confirmed what I had suspected. The refinancing inquiry had been a preliminary step, and had it moved further without my knowledge, I could have been attached to a significant debt obligation with no legal awareness or consent. He advised me on the specific steps to take and told me the bank's flagged application alone was enough to pursue a formal complaint if I chose to. I chose to. Courtney received notice from the bank's fraud division 12 days later. I did not hear about it from Daniel. I heard about it from my neighbor Patrice, who mentioned she had seen Courtney's Tahoe parked outside the Reeves house with a for sale sign in the window. Then from my friend Gloria, who ran into Daniel at the hardware store and said he looked like he had aged several years and was buying materials for a repair project in their kitchen, which he was apparently doing himself for the first time in his adult life. Then from Sophie, who texted to say that her mother had quietly closed her membership at the club and was taking on additional consulting clients. The structure was not collapsing. It was simply finding its actual foundation. It turned out the foundation was smaller than the structure had been pretending. I did not feel triumphant about any of it. I want to be honest about that. There is a version of this story that turns into something sharp and satisfying. A story where the person who was wronged stands at a window watching the consequences arrive and feels vindicated. That was not what I felt. What I felt was something more like grief with a clean edge to it. Grief for the years I had spent making myself smaller to keep the peace. Grief for the son I had somewhere along the way, let learn that love was a service you could bill against. But beneath the grief, something else. Something that had been waiting a long time to be noticed. I fixed the kitchen floor. It took a Saturday and 2 hours of watching tutorials on my laptop, but I got it done. The new linoleum was a warm cream color, and it looked so much better than I had expected that I stood in the middle of the kitchen for a full minute, just looking at it. I scheduled the dental appointment I had been putting off. I bought a new pair of reading glasses, the kind with the slim tortoiseshell frames I had admired in the pharmacy for 2 years and never let myself pick up. I wore them around the house that evening while I read, just because I could, just because they were mine and I had chosen them. Daniel came back 6 weeks after our kitchen table conversation. He called first this time, asked if he could stop by on a Saturday, said he wanted to bring the boys. I said yes. He arrived at 11. Caleb and Marcus tumbled out of the back seat in the way boys that age do, all elbows and noise, and Marcus immediately spotted the new bird feeder I had put up by the back fence and ran to investigate it. Caleb asked if I had made anything, and I said there was cornbread cooling on the counter, and he looked genuinely relieved, which made me laugh for the first time in longer than I could remember. Daniel stood in the driveway for a moment after the boys went in. He was wearing a plain gray jacket, no firm logo, no brand name. He looked tired in a way that was not unbecoming. It was the tired of a man doing his own work for the first time in a while. "Thank you for having us," he said. "You are my son," I said. "You do not thank me for that." We went inside. I made lunch. Tomato soup and cornbread, nothing elaborate. The boys ate like they had not seen a home-cooked meal in some time, which I suspected was not entirely an exaggeration. Marcus showed me a drawing he had made at school of an astronaut on a planet with 2 moons. Caleb told me about a book he was reading about shipwrecks. It was the kind of ordinary afternoon I had been longing for, without knowing how to say so. After lunch, while the boys were in the backyard with a football, Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same place he had sat 6 weeks before. But the air between us was different now. Courtney and I are in counseling, he said. She is also working with an attorney. Separately. He chose his words carefully. Things are difficult, but I think they need to be. I nodded. She is not here today, he added. That was her choice. I think she is not ready. I think she is still angry. He paused. I am not here to ask you to forgive her. I don't think I'm in a position to ask that. You are right, I said gently. That is between her and me. When and if the time comes. He looked at his hands. I keep thinking about what you said. About how I never asked. He swallowed. I didn't ask because I think some part of me didn't want to know. Knowing would have meant changing something, and I had gotten very comfortable. This was more honest than I had expected from him, and I let it land before I responded. People do that, I said. It is not unique to you. The problem is that someone always pays for that comfort, and it was me. He nodded. He did not defend himself, which was itself a kind of growth. I am paying the mortgage now, he said. Both cars. The boys' fees. Everything. It is hard. He said this last word simply, without drama, like someone reporting a weather condition. But I think it is supposed to be. It is, I agreed. From the backyard, one of the boys shouted something about the football going over the fence, and the other one laughed, and for a moment the kitchen was filled with the sound of them being 12 and 10 and uncomplicated, and something in my chest loosened in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with love. Can we do this again? Daniel asked. Bring the boys, I mean. Not for anything. Just lunch. Every other Saturday, I said. If you call first. He almost smiled. It was the beginning of one anyway. After they left, I stood on the porch for a while in the cool air, watching the maple. It had gone fully orange now, the kind of orange that looks lit from inside. The light was going golden and low, the particular slant of a Tennessee October afternoon that makes everything look like it is being remembered rather than experienced. I went back inside. I put on water for tea. I took the accordion folder out of the hall closet one last time, walked it to the recycling bin in the kitchen, and dropped it in without ceremony. It landed with a soft, definitive sound. Then I cut myself a piece of cornbread, the last one, still just barely warm, and I sat at my kitchen table and ate it slowly, in my own house, at my own table, in my own good quiet, wearing my new reading glasses and feeling, for the first time in a very long time, like the most important person in my own life. There is something I want to say to anyone who has been sitting in the position I sat in for too many years. The giving is not the problem. Love expresses itself through giving. The problem is when the giving becomes so automatic, so expected, so invisible to the people receiving it, that it stops looking like a choice and starts looking like an obligation. When your generosity is mistaken for your function, something has gone wrong. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to look at the numbers, whatever your numbers are, the money, or the time, or the pieces of yourself you have been parceling out quietly, and decide that the balance needs to shift. You are allowed to spend some of what you have left on the person who earned it, on yourself. It is never too late to walk back into your own kitchen and find that the floor you fixed yourself is solid under your feet. It is never too late to come home.